but this is my colleague Jeffrey John Kripal. Or JJ, as those of us who know him never call him. Surprising. JJ is the J. Newton Professor of Religion here at Rice, the founder of the Archives of the Impossible. He's the mastermind behind these conferences. Without him, none of this would have happened, ever. And then, of course, Diana Pasulka. She is professor of religion at UNC-Wilmington, and you, of course, know her from her innumerable podcasts, From Here to the Andromeda Galaxy, and her book, The Encounters, and, of course, American Cosmic, where she made the pseudonyms Tyler and James famous, although we all know now that James, in real life, is none other than the intrepid and dashing James T. Kirk of the Starship Enterprise. Happy about that. He's real. I've met him. It's real. And finally, we'd like to bring up to the podium our own Karin Austin. Everybody. Please. You'll have a seat too. Yeah, sure. She actually gave me a note on her way up here that reads, please don't call me Karin.
That's exactly. I did actually telepathically tell you. I did say that.
My name is Karin.
That's exactly what I said.
You know, I should have read that before you came up here, and then
It's all right. You heard me.
It's my bad.
It's
right?
all right. You heard
No,
me.
I won't do it again. It's in my mind. I won't. Okay.
You have at least 10 more times.
Right. And so, for those of you who don't know, Karin is the director of our archives here, and she is invaluable and fantastic. I think that is it. Okay, so let's start in on some of the nuts and bolts. I'm going to sit here so that I can say inappropriate things when I want, and they can chime in.
What's going on?
I think we're
Why is
wrapping,
everyone
we're
looking at
wrapping
me?
the whole event up. We're wrapping the whole
Let
event
me
up.
follow
We're
somebody. What's the vibe? You know, what's needed?
Well, that's what.
And they're
that's
all
what Bill
looking
said.
at me.
I know, that's what Bill said.
So let me say a little something about the nuts and bolts. Is that we, this is not the Soul Foundation, and this is not the Galileo Project. Although we do have weak links with them, and we're friends with people in both of those places, and they're here now, and they've given talks and all that stuff. We highly respect them. We don't do a lot of the scientific stuff, although we have presented that throughout this conference. But the reason from a religious studies perspective that we think it's so important is that, this is not 1951 with the day the earth stood still, or the 80s with Larry King's show with some guy calling up at 3 a.m. about some light he saw on the way home from a bar. This is 2017, and I think for anybody who has, oh wait, this is not 2017. This is late in the day for me too. It's post-2017, and thanks to Leslie Kane and her friends. But, I honestly think that anybody with a rational mind that looks at the evidence is just overwhelming, that you have to come to the conclusion that there is something going on here. This is real, right? It's not just a figment of our imagination. And I consider myself to be fairly rational, the qualification that there are some people who don't think that I'm, rational at all, in fact that I'm out of my mind. That group is commonly known as my students, and they're right over here. But it seems to me that it's true. And if it's true, then the people, it doesn't matter what religious tradition you're in or whether you're a professor of religion, you're atheist or agnostic, you have to deal with this. You absolutely have to. It is going to impact religion in a very big time kind of a way. The question as to how, not sure about that, but you can't ignore it anymore. And so part of this conference, hopefully we'll get some kind of a book out of this, and we'll take it to our American Academy of Religion. We'll have a session on it with 200 scholars, and the floodgates will open. And the floodgates will open because it won't just be us, it'll be the crew, all of us, right? It should be hundreds of us. because this is so important and because it's real. But that was really one of the reasons that we wanted to include that and why we want to write about it in a forthcoming edited book. But that's sort of my take on it. My second take on it is, because it's real, what we really need to examine are all the reasons why people won't believe in this stuff or why it's being repressed. And there are many reasons for that. They're social, they're economic, they're defense-related, they're probably impact the legal system, psychological, and also religious. People have deep-seated belief systems, and this is going to impact them, and a lot of people are not going to want to see this because of their religious commitments. And so we have to really begin that conversation as soon as possible. So that's my take on the nuts and bolts. You guys want to chime in?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I thought this conference was amazing and wonderful, by the way. I learned so much, so thank you for everyone who presented. I just have a couple of things to say, not too much, and maybe it'll spark conversation, I don't know. But I want to go to astronomer Wes Waters. Yeah, his shift of an academic paradigm. And I think that I thought it was a wonderful talk. And as we went through the conference, it became clear to me that we are definitely in a shift, but we're also in what Nietzsche would call the greatest danger territory. And so the paradigm showed to me fairly clearly the shift. I mean, it was really initiated by the common people in the country, right? They had it correct. They said, yeah, these rocks, they don't look like the normal rocks around here. They're hot, they stink, right? And they were told that they were crazy. And so then what happened was that academics got involved, and they started to put their stamp on it and their theories. And it seems to me that that's what's going on. I am an academic, okay? So I'm implicated here. But I don't like that, okay? I don't want that to happen. But I don't know if it can change. That's happening now. So the people who are experiencers have been saying, this is happening, this is happening. People have been saying, no, it's not, no, it's not. And now all of a sudden, here we are at an academic conference that, thank goodness, invites experiencers to, and has obviously the archives here of experiencers' experiences. But to me, it seems like there's a danger as well, and I hope you all can see that there's a danger here, that us academics can say, okay, we got you. Mm-hmm. You know, we're going to put our stamp on it, and this is my theory now, and now we can take it to our disciplines. I was really happy to hear Kimberly's talk on the phenomenology of doing this. This sounds like religious studies. I looked at it and said, gosh, I hope it's clear that I do that, right? I don't know if it is, though, but I think that's a way forward, and Wes as well. So I just wanted to put that out there, that we could possibly be making that same mistake.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a thought.
Please.
Just adding on to what you said, a couple of things, linking. The first thing is, and I'm sorry he's not here right now, but some of you might have recognized Professor Michael Zimmerman, who was here for the first couple of days sitting in the back. It was the first time Michael and I met each other here at this event, and we hadn't seen each other since 2001 or 2002 at a multidisciplinary study. It was the first of its kind other than the MIT event, which was a large event. This was a small gathering of academics who ostensibly came together to try to better understand the phenomenon. And what Michael and I had a moment discussing, because we have these archives available to us, is that we both had the opportunity to look back and look at the transcription? My brain is really tired, y'all. Yeah, just is it a transcript? The transcripts of the conference. And what became immediately obvious to both of us was just how completely ignorant, and I don't mean that in the rude sense, I mean that just in the genuinely ignorant sense, that none of the academics who were there had any clue what this was about. They were completely like nothing. John had some information, Michael had a little bit of information, but looking at that compared to where we are now, and that this is just a small representation of how much this community has grown, and also thinking back on when John Mack was really in a community of one, right, in terms of elite academic, advocacy for this. So in some ways, I feel like 3 decades, 4 decades, it feels like nothing has happened or not much has happened because, like you said, the experiencers keep getting sidelined and relegated, and it's exhausting. It's exhausting, and it's definitely time, if for no other reason than the fact that we're all getting older, we're aging out. Like, I've said, a few people have heard me say this since I've been here. I was, 25, 26 when these things started happening to me when I was adult. I'm staring 60 years old in the face now. We don't have an infinite amount of time left on this planet. And to the extent that scientists and academics are willing to engage us, not to reach some conclusion about what's happening, but just to take a data set to try to understand what information is being presented to us. It's well past time for experiencers to be engaged seriously so that we can begin to figure this out together. So I really appreciate where you're coming from there. Thanks. Jeff?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. I mean, academics, I think, sometimes get a bad rap, and we're just people. I mean, I grew up in a hardware store in Nebraska, and my joke is this is the only field that would have me. It was the only thing I could do. I'm worthless outside this context. I just want people to be people. And that's why I think this focus on the experiencer is exactly right. And I think the intellectuals, those of us who can write, we write to articulate the experience, really, and to give it a bigger voice.
I think that just to add, Link, one more thing on there, I've noticed it a couple of times that there were some things that have been familiar for a while that because academics are so erudite and because you're considered the gatekeepers of human knowledge, you're experts in the field, it's easy to get enough information to have some sense of what the landscape is, and then I'm not going to say you guys, but then you people, the conversation gets elevated, books are written, and then podcasts are had interviewing you people who've written the books. And what ends up often happening is that, again, the actual origin story, the people who have that firsthand knowledge are left out of it in a serious way, right?
Absolutely.
So it's not just about allowing experiencers into the space of a kind of an underground podcast world. It's what does it look like to really integrate experiencers seriously into the entire dialogue? And I think that's what you're trying to speak to as well. Yeah.
Should we open it up to Q&A?
Yeah, anybody for nuts and bolts?
There's a lot of questions. I mean, there's people who want to talk.
Thank you very, very much. This has been very enlightening. And my name is Jonathan Paul de Veerville, and I have questions on all 3 categories. But let me start with the experiences. My experience has been watching balls of light create crop circles over about a 19-year period, going to England and following and watching formations on various occasions. So I mean, that's been quite a spiritual experience from my perspective. What I'm wanting to do, though, is ask a very simple nuts and bolts question. What is the fuel and the energy that the UFOs are using? They're not using Shell Oil or Exxon, but what kind of energy are these craft nuts and bolts vehicles using? Which leads me to another question where I had a series of synchronicities and dreams which tied me to this whole MH370, the disappearance of that aircraft, and the work that is coming out in terms of the possibility that we do have zero-point energy, but that's part of the secrecy, keeping that covered. So I know this is out of the box, it's out of the sphere kind of a question, but I just really felt I had to ask it in terms of this new forms of energy, new forms of consciousness that we're exploring. And I really greatly appreciate all the hard work that's being done here. And I think we're at a threshold, at a portal point. So I hope I made my question.
No,
clear.
Paul, that's a
We
Kevin
have the
Tooth
expert
question.
on that right
Yeah,
here.
or
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
Eric.
Sitting right
The
here.
just one more point. There's this fellow Ashton Forbes who thinks that Hal Puthoff is the Godfather. He knows the secret of all of that.
There's
And
Eric again. There's Eric right here.
So here, Eric, it's all yours.
Yeah.
Someone-
Yeah.
Maybe somebody should give Eric a microphone. Yeah, there you go, Ayesha. That's good.
Get ready.
Eric Davis, please.
Okay. So what we gather from the collective evidence of public data on UFO sightings and encounters, as well as what we know in the classified realm, is that it's not a field, it's bending of space-time. And what bends space-time can be anything in the way of how you want to shape it. It could be positive matter, like this chair, or it could be negative matter. We don't have examples of negative matter, but negative matter is equivalent to negative energy. And we have examples of negative energy. We find that in quantum field theory, and that was invented back theoretically in 1965 and published in a peer-reviewed journal called Nuovo Cemento. And that's an Italian journal, or a Portuguese journal, I think. And however, Hendrik Casimir, a Dutch physicist, posited a waveguide, or a cavity of two plates that are like 1 micrometer apart, a micron. And a conservative force of attraction would appear between those plates and cause the plates to collapse. Well, that's vacuum energy. So I'm going to fast forward into quantum field theory, and we discovered that is a vacuum energy effect, and the energy density is negative. And there you go. Negative matter has equivalent negative energy through E equals mc squared. So we know negative vacuum energy exists. We see it in modified laser beams. Even the planet Earth creates a zone of negative vacuum energy around it because it's distorting the quantum fluctuations in space around it. The sun does that. Galaxies do that. Even the protons in your body do that. But the energy is very feeble. So somehow the UFO-nauts are able to develop, or they have developed a technology to be able to extract negative vacuum energy out of the quantum vacuum and deploy it like a warp bubble. And then we have Alcubierre's warp drive. And the warp bubble is what gives it its levitation effect, the anti-physical effects that we see in UFOs like levitation, anti-gravity, and the rapid accelerating motions where you can turn 90 degrees without stopping or slowing down, that kind of thing. Energy. So you were asking about the type of energy output. Hillebrand von Ludwiger was a physicist. I think he's not with us anymore. And he was a physicist who was part of SEPRA's Japan. And SEPRA was the aerospace organization of the French government, and Japan is the official UFO scientific investigating agency of France, of the French government, and it still is. And he looked at the best UFO cases in Europe, and there were a lot of people who got spectrum and high-quality photographs with luminosity measurements that you could take off the photograph or off of a spectrum. And in one particular case, he was able to estimate the power output, the luminosity of the light being emitted by a UAP, UFO, and estimated in that wavelength of light that was being recorded what the power was. I don't remember what the number is, but I know that based on my estimates of doing this kind of study with my graduate students at Baylor University, we estimated that the amount of power to be produced to produce a warp bubble is probably 1,000 to 10,000 times more energy than the US produces every year. And if you know that UFOs range anywhere from 40 feet, maybe a little smaller, up to even 600 feet, that would require an atomic pile or a nuclear fusion reactor that doesn't exist in our technology. And so it's beyond us. But that's our best physics guesstimate. That's our best physics guesstimate. And we're using it from the concept, from the frame of mind of quantum field theory and general relativity. So we know we can't do this using standard atomic theory, nuclear theory, quantum mechanics. We have to go even further into the more advanced layers of those theories and try to make educated guess on what is propelling these things, what type of method of propulsion is created, and what type of energy goes into it. But it doesn't mean we've got the right answer. It just means this is what it looks like from our science, but it may not be our science. And that's where we come up to it. So we have craft. The majority of the recovered UAPs is from the maritime environment. The ones that landed on ground, some were wreckage, most of them were landed. One of them was just landed and the occupants walked away from it because they gave it to us. They literally delivered it to us as a gift. And we've not been successful in reverse engineering any of it. And talking to the senior vice presidents of at least one of the major aerospace corporations and the security officer of another aerospace corporation and people who I worked with at the Aerospace Corporation, which is an FFRDC of the Air Force and the Space Force and the NRO. I've gathered that they have been able to, the laboratories have been able to understand how these things are constructed, but we don't have the manufacturing technology to emulate that. And we're not even close. And they don't recognize a propulsion and power system in these things. And that's the big problem. We're not there yet. Our physics may be correct, but we're looking at it within the limited scope of human knowledge, of the human ability to explore the theories of our physics. And that parameter space could be quite large, and it could take decades or centuries before we invent the technologies to be capable of exploring the rest of that parameter space within our theories. And there's always the possibility that we haven't uncovered new theories yet. We haven't made new discoveries that will emerge, from which will emerge the type of physics and engineering that the UAP craft are built on. And this doesn't contradict anything Brenda talked about. This actually, Brenda was talking about, I can't paraphrase what she said, but essentially we do have hard craft. And the NHIs are real. There's also NIHs, non-intelligent humans. But anyway. What did you say? The ones in Washington, D.C. that I have to deal with.
Hey guys, I'll try to make it really quick. I noticed in several of the panelists have kind of danced around this, what is the new methodology for investigating UAPs going forward? And I wanted them to say something, but nobody ever really said it, and I don't know if it's profane or unethical or what, but I wanted to suggest something similar to like gonzo journalism, like participatory academics. And I'll just qualify that with my entry point to this world was kind of like the esoteric and the magical. And a lot of the authors that I've read in that regard would call themselves, ceremonial magicians, and then also like translate ancient texts and like try to execute the things that they found therein. And I'm wondering, why aren't we, or are we doing that in the field of UAPs? I know that I've read about, courting UAPs or like trying to go out into the woods and have an experience. And I know that sometimes that's successful and sometimes it isn't. And I guess my question is, what does the panel feel about like instigating this, being proactive and then studying it, and what are the implications?
That's such a great question. I think there's an assumption, and that's probably a fair one, that academics aren't experiencers. I think that should be, perhaps they are. They just don't want to say. So there's that. There's also, I felt like I went to a crash site, a UFO crash site, and I considered that to be participatory. And then after that book was published, I feel like it's a compulsory participation at this point.
So I guess, to that, I would say, like, or something that I'm wondering is, like, are we in a similar position to where we were with psychedelics? Like when Gordon Wasson and Carl A.P. Ruck, put their careers on the line, and some were just kicked out of academia. Is that where we're at? Like, should that be a concern?
It is a concern, but it's not for the academics. I mean, look what happened to Maria Sabina, who Wasson, she was the topic of his ethnography, and her little saints, which were the psilocybin that she utilized to cure people, no longer worked because of the interface with the Western academic. The academic is not the victim.
I have two thoughts to link. One, Elliot, I'm thinking of you and the DMT study. So we're actually, in our research, modeling some of our surveys off of a DMT study that was done for DMT experiencers. So there's connective tissue there. But then I would just also add to what you were saying about the potential liabilities for academics in studying this. This is certainly something that I hope the results of our metadata project will do. In terms of creating a deliverable that science and academia can take seriously, and for that matter, whether regardless of our work, this is a big barrier to entry in research here for I think many or most scientists and academics because of the potential reputational and professional liabilities. So getting rid of the stigma, again, I think is one of the biggest obstacles we can overcome, certainly for the experiencer side. It's one thing, they can study nuts and bolts stuff because that all that fits in the paradigm. But if we really want to study the weird stuff, there's a lot of data around the weird stuff, then we have to reduce the stigma so that academics don't have to be afraid of losing tenure or not being considered for a job position or something like that. So
the other thing I would say, Tony, is, my joke is, that's in the second half of the book you didn't read. but actually, Gary Nolan began with this. He literally began. I mean, the Skywatcher is summoning UFOs. So that's kind of where a lot of this is going, I think, as the research is headed toward this sort of CE5, as Dick Haynes called it. I mean, it's a kind of magical summoning. That's what they're doing.
Thank you.
I'd like to add something. It's not exactly a question. Do you mind, Jeff? Perhaps I shouldn't.
No, go ahead. I'm just laughing because don't ask a question. Say what you say.
No, I'm sorry.
No.
Okay, I'm sorry if I've annoyed you, Jeff. In any case, it was so interesting to listen to Eric. My uncle, who was at Wright Field in the Air Materiel Command when the debris was brought in from Roswell, told me in 1988, after he got permission to talk to me about this, that the same thing, that they had not found any trace of any kind of propulsion system in what they had. And I think there is a reason for that. I think that what we are looking at here are entities who they're post-technological. They are not really using technology, it's them. They are the technology themselves, and the reason this is true is that they know themselves in a much deeper way than we do. When we think of knowing ourselves, we basically look into my personality, my ego, who am I? But there's an even deeper level than that they live in. And it involves an energetic relationship between the being and the universe. And there's a marvelous book by Carlos N.M. Iyer called They Flew that Jeff knows very well. We've enjoyed talking together about it, about medieval levitators who certainly had no technology, but what they did have was a religious ecstasy so extreme that it took them completely out of their egos and delivered them to something that I can only speculate about the nature of, that would draw them, for whatever reasons, up into the air and transform them and their presumably heavy woolen medieval clothing into something lighter, as light as a balloon. I also had a friend who was a novice in the Catholic seminary and ended up as the assistant to the diocesan exorcist. He was named Paul Eno, and he spent a lifetime studying the paranormal, in part because of this experience. The exorcist, Paul, another assistant, a psychiatrist, and two psychiatric nurses ended up at a mental institution in which a young teenage girl who was suffering from both schizophrenia and drug addiction, her family had asked that she be exorcised, because of course she was 17 and they were desperate to retrieve their child who had lost her way. She was sitting in a wheelchair, and during the exorcism, she suddenly rose out of the wheelchair, levitating before everyone's eyes. And the exorcist said to the two assistants, to Paul and the other man, just push her back down into the chair. At that moment, something quite important happened, because it is, I think, it is a clue to what we may find if we look in the right way, in the right places, which is inside ourselves and in the world around us, deeper than we have yet gone, and also, at the same time, into our physics, which I have a feeling has clues as to what this was. They felt an electric energy in her body that vibrated in a vibration, an electricity. And as Paul said, it felt like pushing down a balloon that had static electricity on it. What was that? That's the bridge. Our science can go there, and we can too, by understanding ourselves in a deeper way. We can find it, our physics and us together. Mm-hmm.
We got one more question, and trust me, we got to get out of here because they're going to lock those doors again. And but maybe we don't want to leave. Maybe it's storming out. I don't know.
Josh and Elliot had a question too. I don't know if you want.
Oh, hey, Joel.
Hey, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate everything you've done. You really have pioneered so much of this. It's impressive. And I'm actually accidentally following up on Tony and Whitley. What has become like really clear to me, and Jeff, you have pretty good knowledge of this, is right now in India and the Tibetans, they're manufacturing these experiences. They're happening on accident. They can't totally plan it, but they're manufacturing situations where they have contact. And they're using this contact to heal their mind, their body, and their culture. And that's what they're actually doing. And so we're at a place, and you guys are doing so much work to help translate this, where are these contactees or aliens, are these our new gods? Because we can't just start, I loved what you said about Maria Sabina. We can't just jump over there and totally exploit the thing, and it doesn't work anyway. If I start doing Vajrayana, I'm not getting the results. Trust me, I've tried. Right? There's a big cultural translation. It's massive, and no one's talking about it. No one really understands it. It's new. But science seems to be the language of our, like that's our religious language almost. Like that's when things become true. And so we're seeing now the science here. How far, and so my question, sorry, this is a long explanation, but my question is, to me, like a really, really vital one, and one I don't hear talking about. How far away from me how far away are we from being able to translate these methods of manufacturing contact to heal our own body with our own gods? With our own language, to heal our own mind, body, and soul, rather than everything else that seems to be, and I don't even want to make a social commentary here, but totally fucking insane, right?
That's for one of you. That's for one of you.
That's really hard.
Yeah, yes. I mean,
It's a hard question.
obviously we're a long ways from that. I mean, we're still stuck in the national security, thing,
But
whatever
I
that
think
is.
if we focus on that conversation, we're missing it because, I mean, think about the people that we've met, Jeff,
Yeah.
since we've known each other. I introduced you to a bunch of them, Tyler D being one. I won't say who he is. You all know. But he was a person who was able to contact, to heal, to be helpful to others. He made a lot of money. All of these things. He was a person who was able to do this. He had something that Hussein hammered out earlier today when he said we need this kind of attention to like Ramanujan's technique. And those are, some things that we can study.
I don't know, that's a good question.
Do you want to give Elliot a shot? Or do you want to answer
Sure,
that?
Elliot, a quick one. I just gotta get you out of here, because I'll get in trouble if we're not gone by 5. So, I know, it's 5, I know, we're all sitting here, we're like,
We really just want to lock the doors at 5:30, so if everyone just runs out really fast.
Who am I giving this to?
Jeff, tell us how to think together.
how
How to think with, how to be with. Tell us.
I think this is it.
Yeah. That was it.
Honestly, I think this is it.
The thinking with that you're talking about, the being with, right? It's not this and that. That's an activity that anyone can do. It doesn't have to be with a PhD person or something. But tell us how to do that more.
First of all, I don't use the letters.
Sorry, I said
But-
the letters.
Thinking with means sitting with experiencers and letting them tell their own stories, and then also theorizing new thought out of those experiences. I mean, I think my experience of experiencers is they have a whole wealth of data, as we say, but they haven't worked out a worldview yet. And I think that's where the intellectuals can come in. We can provide the worldview skills, but we don't often have sometimes we do have the experiences. That was Diana's point. We're human beings like you are, and so it's a kind of taking people seriously and listening to people, I think, at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's what's often missing in this bridge, I think.
Yeah.
Because what a lot of people think with, analyze it, but we need be with. And that's something that is much harder, especially for academics, master, because we're not supposed to be doing that. It's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we need all that.
Give her a mic.
Hold on. Let's just.
She said to feel
It's
with
right.
and be with, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, my said just that we need more than just to think with. We often say we often reduce what's actually happening to very simple constructs of I need to analytically understand what you're saying, reduce it, distill it, and articulate it. My experience as both an academic and experiencer and woman is no, we need to feel with, to be with, to use all the sensory apparatus I have to really deeply understand, because there are ways of knowing that transcend the purely analytical. And that is where the methodologies are going to have to go, in my opinion, if we're going to get
Here,
this.
here.
Okay, well, listen, thank you all, and we do have to wrap it up. And thank everybody, thank the speakers and the people who ran it, and thank you. Thank you.